If you have been playing Minecraft lately, watch videos, or follow streams, chances are, you have seen someone playing with the Create mod. Whether it's a friend recommending it, or your favorite YouTuber is starting a new playthrough, Create seems to be everywhere lately. I also love the mod, and I can understand everyone that loves it too. But that got me thinking, with over 50 million downloads in 𝐋𝐢𝐧𝐤𝐬 alone, what does Create achieve that many other mods don't? Why, even for people that rarely touch modded, still loved Create at first sight? Why is Create so popular? To answer that question, we need to start with one of the roots of Minecraft: the difference between extrinsic and intrinsic goals. As explained in the first result I found on Google, extrinsic goals are results that satisfy external reasons, and they usually depend on the contingent external approval and rewards from others. So in short, a goal that is given to you. For example, some games will ask you to go to a certain place, or maybe give you tasks that you need to do, while intrinsic goals are motivated by internal reasons or inherent psychological needs. In other words, it's something we set for ourselves. For example, deciding to go for a certain build because that sounds more fun, or collecting a specific unit just because aesthetically looks cooler. If we apply that to Create, we can observe how the mod doesn't really provide us with any goals. It simply drops us there with a bunch of components to use. And so, we create our own goals. We decide what's important. Is the scale important? Is important for things to be fully automatic? Is self-sufficiency important? Is important for builds to be aesthetical and pleasing to look at? Or is absolutely messy and chaotic fine? And, because we decide on all those elements and come up with the solutions to achieve those goals, we are also, inadvertently, creating our own problems. Unless we are the definition of perfection, chances are, if we look back at our own base, we're gonna be thinking, oh, it would be better if I did this differently. Those problems prop us out to create more goals on top of them. Because of all of this, the build becomes unique and fundamentally our own. Because there is nothing that we needed to do, that everything becomes things that we want to do, and we think it's important. This is what I personally love the most about this mod, and what I try to remind the humans every time I can. That there is no wrong way of doing things. Maybe for you, it's important that the farm is as efficient as possible. Maybe for someone else, it's important that the farm produces the biggest rates possible, regardless of efficiency. Maybe a builder prefers to make the farm look cooler, even if that means crippling the productivity. We shouldn't shame on others for their choices, but to be grateful that we even have the freedom to decide. Something that is rooted deep in Minecraft, and a philosophy that hooked me in this game to begin with. Taking a closer look into the mod, there are 3 different categories when it comes to the parts we can use. We have the belts and other parts that will move the items to where we want them to be. Then there are the funnels and similar components that will act as a bridge, connecting the first category of components with machines, inventories, blocks from other mods, or even to a different part of the first category again. We could call the first 2 categories as the logistics side of the mod, with some parts being in both categories, depending on what they are being used for. The last category is those components with a process or a function on them. Here we have things like mills, mechanical crafters, crushing wheels, and so on. These categories are quite simple to understand, and so are the little bits and pieces from them. But to make a farm or to automate something, we will need to arrange many of these components in a relatively complex pattern. And that granularity presents a series of engineering trade-offs. More spacious setups will allow for adding or editing things more easily down the line. But they also cost more to set up, they will run slower if they have to wait for the items to be moved around, and you might spend quite some time walking back and forth around the area. While smaller and more compact setups might require a smaller amount of materials, and has the potential to be faster and more efficient, But it will present a harder challenge, especially when having to plan everything out beforehand, and with very little room to edit or fix parts after it's already made. A fully automatic setup might be more simple to use, and require no intervention, but harder to build, and much harder to edit and expand upon. While a manual setup might take no time to make, and require very little space and materials to build. Like those, there are many decisions to make, and things to consider when building something, and it will all go down to what goals we have, and ultimately, what we actually want to do. The best part about those trade-offs is that they are real trade-offs. Following the same example of making something fully automatic, we traded time, planning, and more materials to make it easier to use later on. And the same way, it could also be done both automatic and manual by using even more materials on an even more complex setup. Not only they are meaningful, but by letting you build complex setups with small components, these trade-offs come naturally from the mod. So far we answered why people keep playing it, and become addicted to it. But that's after already having started to play with the mod. So a question still remains, why is it that it attracts so many people? No one looks around mod sites for the latest releases of mods with intrinsic goals and meaningful trade-offs. So before knowing that, what it is that lures people to try it out? When I first tried the mod, I didn't even know what it was about. I was making some sort of sewer on the side of a lake house, and I wanted to add a water wheel in there. So I took the only mod that I could find with a rotating water wheel and that's it. I literally added that single water wheel and did nothing with it. But because I already had the mod installed, and I knew there was stuff I could do with it, that I put a 1% effort to see what the water wheel could do for me. And that introduced me to the in-game guides that 𝐋𝐢𝐬 has. That story shows two things that 𝐋𝐢𝐬 does really well: luring us to try it, and hooking us in. 𝐋𝐢𝐬 lures us with its awesome aesthetics. If you are like me, you might consider that many technical mods are fairly ugly. They just don't quite fit with the Minecraft vibe. 𝐋𝐢𝐬 has a beautiful aesthetic that allows us to build really cool stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be functional either. And at the same time, it perfectly fits in the Minecraft vibe. Whether you building medieval, steampunk, modern, or futuristic. And, once it lured us in, and we decide to give the mod a go, it will hook us in with its amazing accessibility. For many people, the fact that you need to search endless guides over the internet, and use dozens of mods that explains what's going on, makes it for a really daunting task. If we got lured in for the aesthetic, but then we hit a brick wall for lack of accessibility, the likelihood that we will drop the mod is pretty high. The only reason we would stay is if we were looking exclusively for a technical mod to begin with, which very well means removing many potential players for the mod. 𝐋𝐢𝐬 fixes that issue with two things. The first one being the absolute game changer that is the pondering system. When I used 𝐋𝐢𝐬 for that simple water wheel, I couldn't be bothered to search for a guide to check out the mod, I just wanted a water wheel. The fact that I was able to put zero effort into it, and still find out very easily some cool applications for a water wheel is what piqued my interest to try the mod a little bit more. And that comes from someone who didn't even know that 𝐋𝐢𝐬 was a technical mod in the first place. The other reason is that 𝐋𝐢𝐬 adds fairly simple concepts that later on become part of complex machinery. With a little bit of logical thinking, it's very simple to grasp the idea that a water wheel generates rotational force, and that rotational force can move a press and flatten an iron ingot. Or make a mill spin and grind wheat to produce dough. If we compare it to other technical mods, or even Redstone itself, you either know some obscure and arbitrary interactions, or you don't, there is little in between. Like for example, a full cake when attached to a comparator gives a redstone signal of 14, and all the uses that might come with it. Create does have some interactions that are harder to know, especially when it involves vanilla mechanics, but it gives a very simple starting point that is accessible to nearly anyone, and with every little thing you build, you can already see the next step, and many new ideas of things to do. And that gives Create a very natural progression through its complexity curve. When building a farm in vanilla, especially when following a guide that involves many parts and interactions that will likely make no sense unless you are an expert, and very knowledgeable about it, it will make it hard to feel any attachment to it. Because Create is far more accessible and intuitive to play, even without any guides, that when you build something with your own hands, it gives a feeling of ownership. You can go back to your factory and see the history behind it. See where you started, and what improvements you made along the way. Something that represents the uniqueness of your own build. Combining all of that together makes the Create mod have one of the best first impressions out there. Whether it's watching our favorite YouTuber playing it, or finding a couple of pictures online, it will very easily pique people's interest to try it out. To sum up my opinion on why I think Create is so popular. In a way, it reminds me of Factorio. By giving the players small components, it provides a lot more freedom of choice to decide what to do with all of it. Something that Minecraft itself does really well, and it's one of the main reasons why it succeeded for so long, and continues to do so. By being aesthetically pleasing and fitting within the game, it lures you in to try it out. And for its accessibility and easy-to-climb complexity curve, you will stay hooked forever. Of course, that's just my opinion based on my own observation of the mod and similar games that function the same way. The examples and thoughts I shared are simplified for the sake of clarity, and the video not being 5 hours long. So, many of the things I said might only be 97% true, and dependent on the context. Also, to state the obvious, none of what I said means that Create is perfect in everything, and any other technical mod failed in every way. All of them have many good things to point at, I just happen to talk about some that Create has. This video was a bit different than what I normally do, but I hope the humans enjoyed it nonetheless. I'm very curious to know which was the first interaction you all had with the mod, and what keeps you going back to it. Hopefully, it will be a more epic reason than just wanting a moving water wheel like me. If you love the mod but you have no one to share it with, I have a Discord server where you will find other humans that also love the mod. I'm also going to be releasing a new season on my server soon, which of course involves the Create mod, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.